Sustainability N. The government is focusing on the sustainability of the environment by promoting the use of renewable energy. Topography N. The topography of the city makes it difficult to build tall buildings in some areas because of the hills. Potential N. My English teacher always tells me that I have great potential to get band 7.5 if I study consistently. Immense J. The immense pressure of the final exam made many students feel stressed and anxious. Sketch V. Before designing a building, architects usually sketch their ideas on paper to see the overall structure. Elegance N. The elegance of the traditional Vietnamese how dye always impresses foreign tourists. Visionary J. Steve Jobs was a visionary leader who changed the way people use technology around the world. Insulation N. Good insulation in houses can help save a lot of electricity by keeping the rooms warm in winter. Canopy N. The large canopy of trees in the park provides cool shade for people to relax during the hot summer. Phase N. The construction of the new airport is now in the final phase, and it will be completed next year.
How many of you know people who hate studying but love doing crosswords or playing computer games that challenge their minds and their reflexes? Lots of you, I'm sure. Well, one objective is to learn to enjoy studying in the same way we enjoy those crosswords and computer games. Okay, we'll come back to that later. Now, I want to discuss a few basics. 1. Regular exercise. Countless studies show that regular physical exercise, say 40 minutes or so, 5 days a week of jogging, fast walking, weight training, tennis, whatever you enjoy, puts you in a more positive frame of mind and also increases creativity and memory for hours after the exercise. Other important things are to eat good, healthy food, get enough sleep, and try not to spend too much time and money in the student bar. There's nothing worse than trying to learn something or solve a problem than when you have a hangover. So, as the Romans used to say, mens sana in corpore sano, a healthy mind in a healthy body. Right, now we're all going to keep fit and healthy. What about the studying? First, you must work out the times that you will use for study. When I say study, I mean all the schoolwork, writing essays, reading, etc., that you do out of class. Be realistic. Don't plan to spend 60 hours a week on it. It's too much for most of us. Set aside 1 or 2 blocks of time, each of, say, 2 or 2.5 hours a day, that are your study time. As I say, be realistic. Don't set yourself such an ambitious goal that you will never stick to it. And it's also a good idea to leave 1 day a week, Sunday perhaps, completely free, so you can relax, and occasionally do some schoolwork at those times when it builds up a bit. That's time settled. Now for place. We are creatures of habit. We do things better when we do them in places that we associate with a particular activity, in this case, studying. So it's best to try and set aside a quiet place, perhaps your bedroom, a study if you have one, which is where you study. When the weather is nice, it could be outdoors. Nothing is nicer than reading and thinking about that novel you have to read for English Literature 101 on a quiet, grassy bank by a stream on a sunny day. And we mustn't forget the library. Most of us find that studying, surrounded by the learning of centuries, is inspiring, as though studying is the only proper thing to do in a library. Okay, time, place, what next? It is questions. Before you set out to read something, always ask yourself,
carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello everyone. Do you use the internet? If I asked you what is the single most common topic for advertisements on the net, I suspect ads for weight loss would win hands down. After all, dieting is one of our current obsessions. We've all heard of the Atkins diet, the macrobiotic plan, the South Beach diet, the raw food eating plan. All of these fad diets and many more promise that you will lose kilos and live a healthy life if you just follow their plan. Today we're going to discuss one of the most well-known Western diet trends, the paleo or caveman diet. Firstly, what is this diet and where did it come from? Proponents of this diet argue that we need to return to basics, that is, to what our forebears ate many years ago. They say that our bodies are not well suited to digest complex carbohydrates such as grains and legumes. We should be eating a hunter-gatherer diet, rich in lean meat, fish, nuts and berries, and without wheat, oats or other grains that came into our diet after the invention of agriculture. Sounds logical, doesn't it? But let's look a little closer. The first question to ask about the caveman diet is, what did our ancestors actually eat? One way to discover this is to study the diets of existing hunter-gatherer tribes. Although these groups do tend to regard meat as the best source of food, they often have difficulty in finding it. In Africa, for example, over 50% of the time, the Bushmen tribes come home empty-handed from their hunting expeditions, despite being very skillful with equipment such as bows and arrows. So what do they eat when they can't get meat? Well, the wives come to the fore then, foraging for and cooking local plants. Most of the groups eat a lot of plants. These range through a huge variety of local species, including nuts, plantains and yams, and evidence suggests that this was true of our ancient ancestors as well. Researchers suggest that these people would eat more meat if they could get it, but in fact only approximately a third of their calories comes from this protein and fat-rich source. Research shows that when these groups first come into contact with a Western diet, their health suffers. Once they're exposed to our diet of refined carbohydrates and sugars, they quickly develop our lifestyle-related diseases. However, that does not mean that the human digestive system is suited to digesting only a few sources of food, nor that it cannot change to accommodate different food sources. In fact, the evidence would suggest exactly the opposite. As a species, we are able to make significant modifications to our digestive systems according to what foods are available in our local environment. Examples abound, and our ability to digest lactose is a good one. Lactose is a sugar that is found in milk, and it is digested in the human gut by the enzyme lactase. In communities in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa that traditionally herd cattle and drink cow's milk, this enzyme is present and people can digest milk products. However, in places such as China and Thailand, which do not have this style of farming, the enzyme is lacking, and most people have lactose intolerance. Another example is the ability to digest the sugars from starchy foods. Communities that eat a lot of these foods have saliva that breaks down starchy foods before they reach the gut, whereas other groups have more difficulty in getting nutrition from high-starch sources. In fact, if you look at indigenous cultures around the world, there is a huge variety of successful diets. The Inuit get nearly all of their energy from high-fat sources, such as seal meat. The Jains in India have religious beliefs which prohibit eating any living thing, including eggs, but which do, however, allow for the consumption of milk products. Other groups eat mostly fish or have an insect-based diet. depending on locally available sources of protein. So the idea that our caveman ancestors ate one homogeneous diet and that if we follow this we can all be healthy would seem to be an oversimplification. Diets are the result of complex cultural dietary practices. People can and will eat just about anything. So, if we can eat a variety of diets, is there anything actually wrong with following the caveman diet? Well, firstly, on a practical level, it's an expensive way to get your daily calories. Few of us can afford to satisfy all of our energy requirements on a diet which depends on lean wild meat and nut oils. A few carbohydrates provide a cheap, filling and substantial energy boost for most of us. Secondly, a diet which includes a large proportion of red meat may not be good for our long-term health if our bodies are adapted to a sedentary lifestyle and a plant-based diet. We simply get less exercise than our ancestors did, and so we are more prone to some illnesses than they were. Finally, if we all start to eat a wild meat-based diet, this will have negative implications for the environment, because it's not a sustainable way to feed a lot of people.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
You will hear part of a sports science lecture about the history of the sport called squash. Look at the task, then listen and answer questions 1 to 5.
The game of squash is essentially a variant of other racket sports and is a close cousin of tennis and badminton. The game was developed at Harrow School in England in the 19th century and soon spread to the USA and other parts of the world. Unlike tennis, squash has no net, and the small court is surrounded by high walls against which the ball is hit. The word squash was originally used to refer to the soft ball that is used in the sport. These are made of rubber and have to be warmed up before a match because when they're cold, they don't have a great deal of bounce. Rackets were originally made from wood, although these days synthetic materials have become the norm. Squash balls come in different qualities, and a colored dot tells you what type of player they are most suitable for. For example, a beginner's ball would have a blue dot, an advanced player's yellow, while an intermediate player would use a ball with a red dot on it. When top players hit the ball, it typically flies through the air at a speed of 200 kilometers an hour, although the fastest recorded example is of a ball traveling at 280 kilometers an hour.
The National Motorcycle Museum opened its doors on the 1st of October 1984 with a collection of more than 350 motorcycles on display. Since then, it has become the largest motorcycle museum in the world, with 5 exhibition halls containing 650 machines fully restored to the manufacturer's original specifications. On the 16th of September 2003, the museum suffered a serious fire, resulting in damage to 75% of the structure and some 400 machines. Due to the determination of the owners, staff and contractors, the museum doors reopened on the 1st of December 2004. As well as the exhibition hall, the museum also offers other facilities for visitors. The restaurant was also rebuilt in 2004 and now seats 950 diners, whilst the new conference centre offers state-of-the-art audiovisual equipment. The museum's oldest exhibits are over 100 years old. The oldest two-wheeler is actually a bicycle with an engine attached, which dates back to 1902. Even older still, however, is the Beeston motorised tricycle, which was constructed in 1898 to celebrate the raising of the speed limit to 12 miles per hour in 1896.
You will hear part of a lecture about a scientific expedition at sea in the 19th century. Look at the task, then listen and answer questions 1 to 5.
Today, I'm talking about a round-the-world expedition that took place between 1872 and 1876 aboard a sailing ship called HMS Challenger. This expedition is widely regarded as representing the birth of the subject we now know as oceanography, the study of the world's seas and oceans. Built in 1853, Challenger was unusual in being powered by a steam engine, as well as by sails. This made the ship perfect for exploration and scientific research because it wasn't as dependent on the wind as the traditional sailing ships of its day. The ship was specially adapted for the voyage, and there were laboratories on board, as well as other facilities for research into subjects such as natural history and chemistry. The captain of the ship was a man named George Nares, who had previously been a chartmaker, working for the British Navy in Australia and the Middle East. He was also a writer who'd published an influential book on the subject of navigation. Nares was chosen as captain of the Challenger because of the scientific approach he took to all his work, which made him very well suited to lead an expedition of this sort. The expedition was led by a man called Charles Thomson, whose specialty was botany. Challenger was to travel more than 125,000 kilometers under his leadership. A total of 4,000 new species of marine life were discovered during the expedition, which took samples of the seabed as well as analyzing the waters near the surface. Nearly 1,500 samples of seawater from different locations were collected, each securely sealed in a glass container and returned to Britain. Quite a difficult thing to achieve on board a ship at that time.
You now have some time to look at questions 6 to 10.
So what was the most important achievement of this expedition? Using a technique known as dredging, scientists aboard the ship were able to collect many rock samples from the seabed that contributed enormously to the understanding of mineralogy. But the expedition's greatest achievements concerned the water of the oceans itself. Scientists had long thought that away from the surface and effects of the sun, the temperature of the deep oceans must be constant. By taking measurements in different oceans, scientists aboard Challenger were able to show that this was not the case. Challenger also discovered the existence of the Mariana Trench in the Pacific, where the ocean is at its greatest depth, as well as the underwater ridges in the Atlantic, above which the water is relatively shallow. The existence of such variations was another major discovery in what was one of the most significant expeditions of the 19th century. Once back in Britain, the work didn't stop, and it was 19 years before all the final findings of the expedition had been written up and published. The impact and influence of the expedition has been immeasurable and is still felt today. The report came out gradually in 50 separate sections known as volumes, each one contributing significantly to scientific knowledge. In recognition of the scientists' achievements, the American space shuttle Challenger was named after the expedition in the 20th century.